Hi friends, Larysa here, Happiness Archaeologist. I had a certain topic planned for tonight, but while I was snacking on some cucumbers and tomatoes, I was listening to the wonderful talk of a friend that's just a magnificent person and so full of love. And it was his talk he did at church recently, and he was talking about, one portion of his talk said, a reminder about how the atonement is not just for our sins. The atonement of Jesus Christ is also there to take away our sadness, loneliness, and hopelessness. And this got me to thinking. Loneliness is something I just don't subscribe to personally. A lot of people online, on their online profiles, will talk about being lonely, and I just don't subscribe. And I was trying to think of how to put in words why that is, and I figured someday I'd do a talk on it. Didn't think I'd be inspired so soon. I believe that loneliness is something that can either pass by or we can feed it and let it take root. Kind of like that Native American story with the two dogs. One is anger, one is love, and the child asks his grandfather which one will win the fight, and he says whichever one you feed. I believe that the feeling of loneliness can come in, and if we don't feed it, it doesn't have to stick around. And that's what I mean by not subscribing. It's not that I don't acknowledge the existence or the possibility, but it's like a door-to-door salesman trying to get you to buy a subscription to a magazine. He might offer you a sample, and you might say, no thank you, I'm not interested, I'm not going to subscribe to get this every single month or every single week, or in the case of newspapers, every single day. And I think subconsciously that's why I always use the phrase subscribing and why I don't subscribe to it. I believe that sitting and stewing in loneliness is not beneficial to us, it's not helpful, and it's not a good feeling. There's so many other things we can get out and do. We could hang out with people from church. We can go visit the elderly, who I had another conversation tonight. They don't receive enough touch. So if we feel touch deprived, why don't we go make some friends with some seniors who are missing their friends of their own peer group, and share some hugs, share some conversation, reduce the loneliness. It seems like a lot of people that are younger seem to think that if they're not in a romantic relationship, that excludes them from the feeling of togetherness. But there are so many other ways of getting it besides just romantic relationships. Just like they talk about with cuddle parties and professional cuddlers, a lot of times in the culture, people think that you only have access to physical touch when you're in a romantic relationship, but in reality, you have access to it so many more places that you may not think of. And when you're touching someone in the same way that you would a sibling or a family member, and it's not romantic, you're getting all kinds of benefits, and it's easy to do with someone that you might not want to be romantic with, someone that you would not want to kiss for various reasons. But you can still share a hug that is helpful and meaningful to all involved. I think the next topic I will go with, it's along the same lines, but I often forget about how the atonement can help cleanse us of our unhelpful feelings, like the ones mentioned: sadness, loneliness, hopelessness. I myself often think of it as related to sin, and I think it is meant to cover so much more. They're talking about it all the time at church. Why is it not getting through to my brain? But I have noticed, even recently, I have a friend that is a wonderful friend. I'm so glad to spend time with him. And while he is looking for romantic interaction with females he comes across, I am not in that category of options to him. He's not interested in me romantically. And I noticed that, I'm very good at keeping things sort of filed away where they should be, but I had noticed I kept feeling the desire to kind of connect with him. certainly as friends. I love that. But I kept having thoughts that were not helpful to me, because if I'm thinking of him in a romantic way and he's not thinking of me that way, that is not a feeling that's going to lead to anyone feeling good, because that could make him uncomfortable, and it could make me, as Kramer from Seinfeld would say, yearning for something that I don't have on the menu of options for me. So what I noticed was, this past Sunday, we didn't just go to one church. We went to several different segments of church, and we had a lot of church that day. And even though during one meeting we missed sacrament at church, I found that upon leaving and thinking about it later, I felt like my whole brain was cleansed of those thoughts. I wasn't seeing him in a way that I didn't want to. I wasn't thinking of him or yearning. It just had gone away. And the piece of me that felt like I wanted to reach out so much to someone had been relieved, and sort of like the pressure released. It was as though, that emptiness that may have been a feeling was replaced by God instead. And I certainly believe that's the way it should be and is ideal. I always want God in my heart first and foremost. And sometimes you don't see, like if you have a inner tube or an air mattress with a slow leak, you might be tubing down the river with a nice plump tube in the beginning, and by the middle you're like, ooh, this is getting squishy. And then by the end you're like, good thing we're done, because this tube needs more air. And you don't consciously push God out or anything sometimes, but sometimes your conscious effort to keep him in leaks out. And that's why we go to church and revive that, because just like the wonderful story about the fiery sermon with the coal that gets put by itself and then put back in, I too used to wonder, what's the point of going to church? My relationship is between God and I. And it was from going on retreats with school that I realized it's about the community, because even if you may have a very strong faith on your own, being together with others who believe, you strengthen each other. And that was another point in my friend's talk about, in the battle, how they all work together. And we're in battle every day. We need each other so much more than we even realize, and more than a lot of us like to admit. So we need to link arms, band together, and press forward. I often say, when it comes to holding on to the iron rod of, the right way, I like to think of us as carabinering ourselves to each other. So if one of us falls off, we're connected to several other people who can then take a hand and grab us and bring us back to the iron rod, because they're still on and we're dangling from them and they can reach. And then someday down the line, we will have a tight grip and they will fall and we will catch them and bring them back. But it is through our connections that all those negative feelings are removed and we thrive the best. I have so many connections today, but I was discussing with someone about how people, when they have various roles in their life, like sister, daughter, grandmother, aunt, CEO of a company, the more roles they play and the more connected they are to others, the happier they are. Science proves it, so therefore it's got to be true. But connecting with people, that is the solution. It does not have to be in a romantic relationship. We can't all find that. Sometimes the odds of that are not going to be in our favor, but that is no excuse to not connect with others. Go to a library group, discussion group, book group. You're talking to people, making new friends. I'll always say, go social dancing. Lots of new people to meet there. Go to church, talk to people, be out in the world, but make sure you don't get isolated, because that's when those feelings can creep in, and without anybody near you to kind of pull you out, you'll sit there and sort of stew in those feelings. So it doesn't have to be the way. When the door-to-door salesman of loneliness comes knocking at your door, you can tell him, no thank you. You don't need any more paper clutter in your house with those newspapers or magazines, however frequently they come. So those are my thoughts for tonight. I'm hoping that is helpful, and I'm hoping you're having a wonderful week, and I send you lots of love. Thanks for listening.